The main way I'm seeing my students use the AI tutors as a homework help to do like kind of their normal everyday practice type things and to be getting clarification and feedback as they go.
Hello there, and welcome to today's episode of the Easy EdTech Podcast. My name is Monica Burns, and I am so glad that you're here to join me today. If you want to make the most of education technology, aka EdTech, well, you are in the right place. My goal has always been to help make EdTech easier and give you ideas you can try yourself, share with a colleague, or bookmark for later in the school year. Every Tuesday here on the Easy EdTech Podcast, you'll hear stories from my time in the classroom, the work I do now with schools and districts, and my travels to different EdTech events. Get ready for solo episodes where I share some quick tips and stories, and interviews full of practical ideas and stories from new guests each month. If we mention something you'd like to check out, make sure to click the link. You'll find it in the episode description or the summary area where you're listening to this podcast, or you can find every episode and all of the resources we mention by going to classtechtips.com/podcast or by going to classtechtips.com and just clicking on the Easy EdTech Podcast button at the top of the page. This episode is sponsored by my quick reference guide using AI chatbots to enhance planning and instruction, published by ASCD and ISTE. It's full of quick tips educators can use, and Amazon almost always has it on sale. Just search for me, Monica Burns, on Amazon to see all of my books and quick reference guides. But please remember that there are 2 authors named Monica Burns on Amazon, and I'm pretty sure you'll be able to tell the difference between our books. Just head to Amazon, search Monica Burns, and you'll find my quick reference guide using AI chatbots to enhance planning and instruction. This episode is titled How Teachers Are Using an AI Tutor for Students with Chelsea Sterrett. And if you're curious about how artificial intelligence is changing, is impacting the education space, well, specifically through the use of AI tutors, at least that's our theme for today, then you're going to want to tune into this conversation. As a high school teacher, Chelsea has first-hand experience bringing AI tutors to her students. So today she shares some practical strategies for introducing this technology to groups of kids and offers some crucial advice on what to consider as you integrate AI into your classroom. Whether you're ready to jump in or just curious about what this looks like in a real classroom setting, Chelsea offers some must-hear insight you're not going to want to miss. Let's get into the conversation. Welcome to the podcast, Chelsea. I am so excited for you to be here today to talk about a topic that comes up a lot in conversations when I'm talking to educators, which isn't just AI, but AI and student use. And we're going to talk today about AI tutors. But before we get into all of that, can you share with listeners, what is your role in education? What does your day-to-day look like?
Okay, so thank you so much, Monica, for having me. I am a teacher at an all-girls school in Salinas, California. It's a really small school, so all of us wear a lot of hats. So I teach chemistry and AP physics and dual enrollment geology, and then alternating years I teach AP environmental science, which I love as well, but I'm not teaching that class this year. And then the chemistry classes, we have honors and regular in the same class, so we have a lot of differentiation going on there. And then I'm also the instructional technology coordinator at my school, so I kind of run like our Google admin side and our LMS and help teachers download data. So with all of those different things that I do, a typical day is not always typical. That like kind of need to see what students or teachers need besides teaching my classes. But for instance, today, I got to work and I had to create a new version of a chemistry quiz. And then I was setting up a physics lab. And then when students came in, I, coordinated all of that. And then I gave that chemistry quiz in the next class. And then I was running reports for a couple of teachers for some testing data that the students just did. So lots of things on my to-do list every day. And then in my classroom, lots of different things going on.
Yeah. And when you and I first connected via email, right, I was telling you about AP environmental science and how as a student, that was like one of my favorite high school courses. Definitely one I think back to a lot, when people talk about like, why do I need to know parallelograms, or a rhombus isn't going to help me with my taxes, right? All those silly memes, right? I think back to AP environmental science a lot. And so, with your wide range of content that you teach, with differentiation being such a big focus because of the range of students that you support, I'm excited to jump into this topic today. We're talking about AI tutors, using an AI tutor with students. And if someone's maybe heard that term, doesn't quite know what it looks like in action, how would you describe an AI tutor to someone who hasn't seen or hasn't used one before?
Right. Yeah. So I think when we think of AI in the classroom, there's a lot of hesitation. And as we probably know too, a lot of times with good reason, that teachers are worried that it's going to become a tool for students to get out of learning and find a shortcut to answers. So an AI tutor is like not a free for all. It's a really focused and useful tool. And there's a lot of different versions around, but it's a way for students to, I think, get feedback and get coaching. Kind of see, hang on, let me see what I wrote down as earlier to help me out a little bit on my question. So I think this is a great question. So we can think of AI in general sometimes as like the fear that students might cheat. An AI tutor has guidelines built in to help students think through a question, or kind of like does what a real teacher would do, what I would want to do if I had those moments to be one-on-one coaching every single student every single minute. But we don't have that time as teachers. So it's kind of a way to do that for us and to give students that feedback and encouragement or reassurance that they're on the right track.
And I think for someone who is coming to this conversation around AI and student use, right, there's, of course, right, that healthy hesitation, is this a cheating tool, right? What does this actually look like in practice? But I like how you use the word coached, in that description, because I think there's a coaching aspect that's there too, a scalability that's really compelling for someone who might be curious about what AI looks like outside of, say, instructional planning or creating supplemental resources, which I know is a use case I talk a lot about, more probably so than student use cases. So what first sparked your interest in trying an AI tutor in your classroom? How did you even introduce this concept of using AI support to your students?
So it's funny because I didn't really seek it out or plan to start using it, but the platform that I was already using for all of my classes, positivestem.org, there's also like a physics part of it, a chemistry part of it, and then I'm the author for the environmental science part of it. So I was already using this tool in all of my classes, and then the platform introduced a AI tutor that was built in, and teachers have the option to turn it on or off. But I saw when it was appearing for students, I don't know if I noticed it first or if the students noticed it first, but I started referring students to it if they were telling me, like I had a hard time on the homework last night, or I'm not sure what to do next. And if I'm, helping a different student across the classroom or setting something up, they can go ahead and get those questions answered and move along at their own pace and get help. So I kind of just stumbled upon it, that it was already a part of a tool that I was using and having success with. And then what really sold me on it as something to use, especially for my English learners, was because my English learners were able to put the AI tutor in their native language and get individualized help and coaching in their own language, so that they were still able to show me their chemistry or physics knowledge or environmental science knowledge, but they were getting that teaching in their own language, which is just so invaluable. We could have not been doing this 10 years ago or even 2 years ago, I guess.
Right. Yeah. It's wild to think about how quickly this technology has changed. And I think it's really interesting that this opportunity popped up in a platform you were already using, which I think is a really great point. There are a handful of different tools that have come on the scene, with AI tutoring being, the thing that they do, right? Or what they primarily offer. But it's been fun to watch tools that have a presence that already are here, right, in our ed tech spaces, either introduce this as a feature or, AI has been running behind the scenes in other ways. We, now are so inclined to point at something and say, that's AI, when
Right.
there was a machine learning component or there was a generative AI component, right, that we just wouldn't have really thought about in the way that we talk about, AI use now. So from a student standpoint, how do kids typically interact with AI tutor? Is it more for review, exploration, clarification? What are you noticing? What are you observing?
Yeah, but I think for the main way I'm seeing my students use the AI tutors as a homework help to do like kind of their normal everyday practice type
Mhm.
things and to be getting clarification and feedback as they go. In physics, for instance, we're working on centripetal force, and it's tricky sometimes because it's not always a straightforward thing. You don't always use the same formula.
Yeah.
It's kind of a combination of forces that you have to look at. So then the AI tutor can help them think through like, what are the forces that are pointing inside the circle? What are the forces pointing outside of the circle? And help them to make those big connections. So I think that it can be super helpful in that sense of helping students make those big picture connections and not just getting to the answer.
Yeah.
Right? Because that's the biggest fear of AI is that, they just put the whole problem into the answer and say, oh, okay, the answer was 7. And they didn't do any of the thinking to get there. So having an AI tutor can help them slow down and break down the thinking to get to each part of the question.
And that's one of the things that I think is important to highlight when you're using an education tool, right? Not just opening up ChatGPT, right? And asking something. When you're using a tool that's trained to do this role of student facing, a study partner, right? It's not jumping from A to Z, it's scaffolding that process. It's first
Yes.
breaking it down. So it's way more intentional. So I totally get why someone might be hesitant to introduce, right, AI, right, from that type of tutoring lens, just in general, because they're used to maybe using a tool that does just give the answer. But it's been interesting to see some of these tutors, what it looks like when you kind of break down the process and giving students that support. And, it's interesting too, what you mentioned about the connections between big ideas. I find even from an instructional planning standpoint, like for a teacher who's an expert in one area, if they want to make a connection to student interests, like they're teaching multiplying fractions and they want to connect it to the rock cycle or to basketball or like whatever the thing is,
Yes.
like that's where some of these chatbots come in handy. So it's interesting to hear that from the tutoring perspective too. So you kind of alluded to this before, but just to ask you more directly, have you noticed any impact, positive or negative, or kind of however you want to quantify it, on students' critical thinking and problem solving skills?
I think, like we were saying, that getting the kids to think about those big picture ideas has been really powerful. So that's been the very positive side of this, of having the AI tutor, that they're able to, besides just seeing like, this is my step by step solving this one kind of problem, to try to think about those general ideas of what are the big things involved in physics or in chemistry or in environmental science. But I have seen that I have a couple of students that I think get very reliant on their AI tutor. And if they don't have their AI tutor to check their work first, that they get a little bit nervous. So the
Mhm.
platform we use, if they get the question right on the first try, it turns bright green. If it took them more than one try to get it right, it turns that light green. And so some of them are like very fixated on getting their all bright greens, and they don't want to get the wrong answer first on their own. And they want to have that comfort, I think, of
Mhm.
the AI tutor to tell them like, yes, you're doing the right thing. But I don't know if that's so bad, because I think that they're learning as they go, and maybe they got to the right answer, but they didn't believe, if they didn't have that faith in themselves that it was the right answer, they needed to kind of hear someone explain why.
Mhm.
So having that tool that can help them like understand why they got it right, maybe that's even more learning happening than would have.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think back to answering questions in my own role as a student, right? And you fill in the bubble and you don't know if it's right. And if it was right, you don't know why it was right, right? So like
Yes.
having that feedback to say this is right because, or this wasn't just a good guess, or, getting
Mhm.
that in the moment reassurance that not only did you get it right, and that's part of it, I guess, right? But you want to understand why. And so I love that idea of having some real time feedback. So, for students who are navigating AI in different ways, right? When they're in a space like this where they're working with an AI tutor, there's a certain level of support that's built into these platforms. But we know that AI in its larger, sense, kids might jump in to another chatbot tool, something that does not have that focus on student use and is made for a larger consumer, market. So I'm curious as if, what kind of conversations you might have had with students about other things that come into play with AI, like bias, like accuracy, or even, data sources related to AI.
We have had some interesting conversations in my classroom, especially with some of my juniors and seniors talking about this, like the ethics of it, of the whole
Yeah.
thing. And so we talk a lot about wanting to think about when you're using a tool, whether it's ChatGPT or just any AI built into a platform, are you using it as a way to help your own learning or, like solve a problem for somebody else? It can be super powerful in the real world and in your one class. But also, like, it could rob you of chances to learn things yourself if you're kind of skipping through
Mhm.
things. I did have some academic integrity issues I had to address earlier in the year
Yeah.
when we were doing a book study of The Disappearing Spoon, which is like a chemistry, still like stories about the periodic. So we were having all these big group discussions, and I would give some guided questions ahead of time to prepare. But then coming to the conversation, having a couple of students who had, very, very different than their normal
Yeah.
way of thinking and talking kinds of responses that they were kind of stumbling over when we said them out loud. So just having to have those kinds of one-on-one conversations about, I know this tool is so accessible and makes it so easy to answer your questions quickly, but I don't want you to lose the opportunity to have thought about these questions yourself, and I wanna hear what you're thinking. So I've had a lot of conversations like that too.
Yeah.
We've also had some, I don't know if you've had these conversations, but as like an environmental science teacher too, there's a lot of questions of the environmental impact of
Yes.
AI, and I don't have great answers for that
Yeah.
either. That is much more focused. It's not just using like a large language model that's access to everything that has to process much more data. It's kind of trained on one small question. That's one way I've addressed it with my students. I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but you're asking questions specific to the problem that you're on, and it's trained to be looking at the lesson that you're on. It's not just necessarily
Okay.
accessing
Yeah.
everything. But it is, it's not something I guess I have a good answer for yet, but it's something that I'm really interested in hopefully hopefully addressing or
Yeah, that's really interesting, that concept of using a tool that's leveraging a smaller data set, which may use less energy. It's I've really heard more and more from educators, which is my primary audience, right, as opposed to say
Mhm.
students. But the past, I would say 9, maybe 12 months, it's been something that's come up way more frequently than say a year and a half ago. And I think that's a really good thing. I think more people are informed. I've heard the term energy thirsty computing, which I think is a really good way to like
Mhm.
visualize just how much energy it takes. And it takes much more energy to use one of these tools than say a, Google search. So, as an environmental, right, science educator, I'm sure it's going to continue to come up, right, in conversations. And, hopefully there'll be some more resources available, right, for those conversations that you have with your students. So for someone who is listening today is now a little more curious, more informed about AI tutors and potentially using it right in their classrooms, what advice would you give to other educators who are considering bringing this kind of tech to their students?
Well, first, if you have access to an AI tutor and a tool that you're already using, that makes it much easier to adopt that always makes it easier to adopt a new
Yeah.
tool if you can find an add-on to something that you're already using. And then my other, I think, advice would be to just try it in class first. Do it as a homework helper or classwork helper when you're in class together to kind of observe what kinds of questions your students are asking and maybe coach them on when they would want to use it and when they might want to start trying things themselves. So you can kind of observe that process with them before you let them loose.
I love that, like almost like the co-learning of that, of using it together, of modeling perhaps, or talking about observations. I think that's a really great way to bring this to a group of students with the level of comfort and transparency for anyone who's listening, who's also trying to build some, capacity for, introducing something that might be out of their comfort zone, right, at first pass. So Chelsea, this was so helpful for listeners who are unpacking this concept of AI tutors. I'm going to link out to some of the resources that you shared, but for someone who's like on the move, on the go, making like a mental bookmark, where can they connect with you? Where can people learn more about your work?
So you can find me on LinkedIn, and we can put that link in the show notes, I guess. And then you could also find my course on positivestem.org, the environmental science course, and my email is available on that link too. chelseasterrett@gmail.com is a great place to reach me. And I would love to hear from more teachers and connect with more teachers who are curious about EdTech and trying all new things.
Wonderful. Well, Chelsea, thank you so much for your time today and sharing all these great strategies with listeners.
Thank you so much, Monica.
Chelsea shared lots of info in today's episode, but let's finish up like we always do with a few key points from the conversation. AI tutors act as structured coaching tools rather than answer shortcuts. Built-in tutors inside existing platforms can make adoption seamless. Multilingual support gives English learners accessible, individualized help. Students can use AI tutors for review, clarification, and help with homework too. Remember, you can find the show notes and all the ways to connect with our guest Chelsea and the resources we talked about today by heading over to easyedtechpodcast.com. This episode is sponsored by my quick reference guide using AI chatbots to enhance planning and instruction, published by ASCD and ISTE. It's full of quick tips educators can use, and Amazon almost always has it on sale. Just search for me, Monica Burns, on Amazon to see all of my books and quick reference guides. But please remember that there are 2 authors named Monica Burns on Amazon, and I'm pretty sure you'll be able to tell the difference between our books. Just head to Amazon, search Monica Burns, and you'll find my quick reference guide using AI chatbots to enhance planning and instruction. Thank you for listening to this new episode of the Easy EdTech Podcast. I love creating new episodes for you each week, but I could use a bit of help spreading the word about the podcast. Can you leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast app? Spotify will let you tap on the stars, and Apple Podcasts will let you tap on the stars and leave a 1 or 2 sentence review. Thank you so much for taking this extra step. It helps other educators find episodes like this one when they're searching for EdTech tips.